The anime scene in the early 2000s was marked by a surge in popularity both in Japan and around the world. The rise of the internet and the availability of fan subs and streaming services allowed fans to access anime more easily than ever before, leading to a boom in the industry. During this time, anime genres diversified and new trends emerged, such as the popularity of dark and psychological thrillers like Serial Experiments Lain and Neon Genesis Evangelion. Of the likes of such shows, one of the previously mentioned ones stood apart, and that was Serial Experiments Lain. Not only was Serial Experiments Lain not like any serialized anime ever until that point, it was highly inspired by psychological horror and films like Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. It was an anime unlike the industry had seen. It featured complex philosophic terminology being tackled in an authentic way, and it pretty much paved the way for other similar anime, like Ergo Proxy, Texonalize, and others. Many of these shows tackled complex and challenging themes such as existentialism, identity, and the human psyche, reflecting the mood of the era. The anime scene of the 2000s was a vibrant and exciting time, and it set the stage for the emergence of new classics like Boogiepop Phantom, which is exactly the anime we will be talking about today. While I normally don't do discussions about anime on this channel, I figured I could branch out and expand on the basis of my work in order to provide a better entertainment value for this channel, and because this is one of my favorite franchises of all time, which spans within the realm of not only anime but books or light novels, to adaptations and some other stuff we'll talk about later. So without further ado, let's get into it. Well, the history of this conundrum of complicated pieces of media is quite complex, so you should really buckle up because this got weird fast even for myself. Boogiepop Phantom is based on a series of light novels written by Kohei Kadano and illustrated by Koji Ogata. The first novel, Boogiepop and Others, was published in 1998 and quickly gained a following for its unique blend of horror, science fiction, and mystery. The novels had their action centered around the titular Boogiepop, a supernatural being that begins with unknown motives at first, but we soon learn it appears when there is a threat to the balance of the world, somehow like a judge or punisher of evildoers of sorts. And get this, the novels were popular enough as to spawn several manga adaptations, the first one being done by the illustrator himself, Koji Okata, began serialization in 1999 and finished sometimes after the first anime aired. But before all that, there was a live-action film released right before the anime, which featured the plot that happens right before the anime chronologically, and let me tell you something, as a huge Boogiepop fan myself, this is such a weird fact. They even had the same outro as the show, shown during the trailer. The fact that I watched the show and missed a huge chunk of content is a testament to the way the show is structured, in that it presents side stories in a non-linear way that occur during different parts of the main plotline that take place in the novel. And the fact the movie is a real thing that exists is just so weird to me, man. Anyways, the manga even has this ultimate guide featuring a comprehensive explanation of the fractured timeline, but I think it only relates to the show and not the movie or other forms of media. But I think the part about the movie needs an entire separate part of this video, so... If you are looking for an honest opinion from me about this film, I really cannot say much about the material except what I read and found online. I really did try to find the movie, to watch it for myself, but as far as I'm concerned, this movie is lost media. Apart from a few trailers I managed to find, I was unable to find any footage of it. I looked for it in every nook and cranny of the internet and even at retail CD stores like Japan CD, but none of them had it, and trust me when I say I went all the way back to the 9th page of Google on this one. So I'm just going to trust Wikipedia on this one. So the next fragment will be the only piece of information I was able to scrub off the internet, read out loud by myself. Boogiepop and Others was adapted into a live-action film with the same name, which was released in Japan on March 11, 2000. The film was directed by Ryu Kaneda and starred Sayaka Yoshino as Boogiepop. The director Kaneda said he did not wish to simply depict modern children as they were. Here, the characters that appear on screen embrace all of their loneliness, and that's something that doesn't change in any era. He continues, I thought perhaps I should turn it into the message that no matter what we must express our sense of isolation from deep inside, that won't let us smile. He encouraged the actors to adapt their characters and allowed ad-libbing. The film apparently strays away from the source material quite a fair bit, making it sit in a kind of grey spot canonically, as it diverts a bit from the source material, and as much as I would like to list all the changes, there are of course spoilers, and I'd much rather prefer you look these certain ones up yourself on Wikipedia under the film adaptation section. There is one thing that is noted under the movie section that I found quite interesting. Apparently filming for this movie faced some difficulties, the movie being filmed in summer, actors were performing entire days in the full sun, and cool packs had to be brought in to keep them going as the heat was way too much for them. As well as the actors for one of the leading roles, characters like for Kirimanagi having to spend 2 months to be able to play the action scene correctly. The hardest part of the movie is cited as the climax of it, filmed from September 15th, 1999, this being already the 25th day of filming. It was the greatest challenge. 50 shots had to be taken in 2 days, all at night. A typhoon reached the Kanto metropolitan area on that day, but against the forecast, it cleared up before they were due to begin filming. At 6 PM, they were ready to begin. As for the soundtrack of the movie, you would assume that the movie and the anime had to have the same soundtrack or at least maybe the same composer, but the thing I can safely say is that even tonally, they don't entirely fit each other. The movie soundtrack was composed by Yuki Kajiura, best known for composing a lot, and I mean a lot, of other anime OSTs such as Sword Art Online, Erased, Fate, Stay Night, and even Demon Slayer. So how is the soundtrack? Well, as I said, tonally the soundtracks of each adaptation don't really fit each other. As what I mean by that is the movie has a more jazzy laid-back approach to sound making that still features the heavy drums of the other soundtracks. They all feel part of the source material and the movie soundtrack is close, but in my opinion not close enough to the vibe. I still love it for what it is and I think it's a great soundtrack, but not every track fits the Boogiepop vibe. The music is often dark and foreboding with dissonant electronic beats and haunting choral vocals, creating an unsettling atmosphere. However, the soundtrack also has moments of beauty and tranquility, using gentle piano melodies and soaring vocals to evoke a sense of wonder and mystery. A few of my favorite tracks are Sad Bird and Embrace. Sad Bird is a more electronically driven song with a nice bass and a laid-back melody filled with a sense of wonder. And while this is one of the tracks I believe doesn't exactly fit the show perfectly, I cannot not say it does not fit it either. As the gentle piano kicks in and synchronizes and then falls into crescendos, you start to wonder more and more, and it really evokes that sense of mystery. While Embrace is a slow and sensual track with a seductive melody, creating a moody and mysterious atmosphere and slow-paced jazzy instrumentation. Boogiepop's theme is also really good as it has some of the best drums in the movie's OST and is overall a great track. Pause. Small edit, actually really large one. While I was editing the video, I managed to get my hands on an actual copy of the movie, which did not appear on YouTube due to it being unlisted and blocked in my country, but I got my trusty VPN and managed to watch it, and I need to thank user Takeda Keiji for uploading the whole movie on YouTube and also being the one to upload the movie trailer that I found earlier and a whole video with the behind the scenes of the movie and the video of the Yubari Film Festival in which the movie actually took part. I've watched everything and this features a lot of info on the production of the movie and insight into the creative process. Also some really nice interactions between the actors and staff, but also presents how hard filming was as stated above. So if you would like to actually watch it, I'll leave a link to all the videos down below. Anyways, as I said earlier, when I was searching for the movie online, I found a bunch of negative reviews. And I get why people did not like it, and I do get why people did like it, now that I've actually seen it. It's clear to me this movie was made by someone who clearly loves the series and tried to interpret it as closely as possible. And while I do believe it did a pretty good job at putting these characters on screen, I believe the lack of budget was a big part of the overall feeling of the movie, as a lot of the movie's well, scenes feel budgety, if that makes sense, with a bit of lackluster shooting and okayish audio mixing. While the earlier parts of the movie are quite well adapted and keep closely to the source material as well as set the mood correctly, I do believe the latter half kinda screws up on that front quite badly by having the last act be incredibly scuffed. Except of a few cool scenes and effects, my overall enjoyment of this is somewhere around a 6 out of 10. But I do blame a lot of that onto the really long runtime of the movie, like holy shit, this is like 2 hours! And while I can see the movie isn't interesting, it didn't quite keep me engaged for the whole runtime. Anyways, I believe that's all of the information I could dig up on the movie, so since this point of the video is done, I think we should move on to something else by doing a segue into the next point of the video.
Short plot summary for context's sake.
In order to move to the shows and even understand the movie, we must acknowledge the story of the light novel. I won't spoil too much, so don't worry about it. Basically, in the books, or more exactly the book Boogiepop and Others, the story takes place in an unnamed Japanese city, a month after a pillar of light appeared in the night sky, and 5 years after a string of serial killings. The story is told from the perspective of different characters, each with their own unique experiences and viewpoints. The main character for the first chapter is a high school student named Keiji Takeda, who becomes involved in the mystery where his classmate Toka Miyashita disappears. As Keiji investigates Toka's disappearance, he discovers a shadowy figure known as Boogiepop, who appears when supernatural threats endanger the world. In this case, some sort of alien dressed in raggedy clothes comes from the sky. Actually, screw that, we don't know what this guy is, and this extraterrestrial being becomes a point of interest in the story of the first few novels. The whole part is actually explored inside the movie itself, actually, and the plot of the 2000s anime starts right after the big light comes from the sky and Redacted happens. While 2019 Boogiepop treats you like a baby that knows nothing about the series, and there is nothing wrong about that, but it executes everything at the wrong pacing. It's basically the story of the movie all over again plus more, but wrong. Now, if you were to compare the two, I'd say the first anime and even the movie, while they do not follow exactly the plot of the books, they are great showcases of in-universe mini-stories and they nail the vibe of Boogiepop, which is something that the 2019 show does not do at all. Actually, I'd say instead of watching the 2019 show, go read the light novels or watch the 2000s show. It's genuinely at times a downgrade, a bad one at that. I'd even suggest watching the movie over that, probably because the 2019 anime left me feeling meh. But we'll get into that more later. For now, we'll take things in chronological order by analyzing the first show, its themes and its art styles, also the editing.
Boogiepop Phantom.
The 2000s show was produced by Studio Madhouse and directed by Takeshi Watanabe, which is a quite small director that only somehow produces small or averagely rated shows, although he did do the key animation on a Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind back in '84 and a bunch of other things. As for the other staff positions, we do have a lot of heavy hitters in this list. Azuhata Takashi is the photography director for Boogiepop Phantom and was the director of photography for Serial Experiments Lain 2, so that is why both shows have a similar feel and imagery, and also have a similar way of shooting things. Maruyama Masao is the producer, which you may know for producing shows of the likes of Monster, Death Note, Trigun and Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue is the mostly important part here, as both shows have psychedelic and well-experimental productions that stray them a bit from the norm of regular anime. Matsura Johei is the same episode director as Lain for some of the episodes. And then last but not least, we have Murai Sadayuki, who wrote the script for Perfect Blue and a few Cowboy Bebop episodes. So with such a strong direction, you would know this show had to be good, right? Well, it depends on who you ask. When there's different people, there's always different opinions, and no matter what you say and do, there will always probably be someone that calls the show mid or bad. The reason why I'm even doing this whole deep dive into this anime and franchise is because it is currently sitting at way worse reviews than Serial Experiments Lain on my anime list, and while I cannot physically change it, I do believe they both come very close in ratings and do deserve the same amount of attention. I think the best way to describe it, as one My Anime List user listed in his review, if David Lynch's son grew up in Japan and became a filmmaker like his father, and if his brain had a mouth, it would vomit Boogiepop Phantom onto our screens. Which is a very nice way to say this show has an amazing editing style and an interesting way of doing slow pacing, having everything interconnect and make sense canonically within the lore. Basically, Boogiepop Phantom is a side story that is going on throughout the plot of books 1, 2 and 4 respectively, and even 5 a bit, which contains a lot of, quite frankly, good mini-stories which all tie together in a non-linear format. While it is not written by the original writer, it has a unique style that can only be presented by discussing the episodes themselves. I will try to keep spoilers of the overarching story to the minimum, so I do recommend you do watch the following segment. I will announce important spoilers to the show if I do mention them though. One of my favorite episodes is episode 4, My Fair Lady, where a student named Yoji Suganuma, who is a socially inept Reddit mod, not really, but he spends all his time inside playing this dating game instead of studying, and his family hates him. He becomes attracted to a new girl who starts working with him at his part-time job in a restaurant, and with the influence of a new aromatherapy drug called Type S, he becomes emboldened to attempt to control her life, just like the girl inside his virtual game, and even names the girl inside the virtual game by the name of the girl in real life. He becomes increasingly creepy and the lines between fiction and reality blur, resulting in confusion and insanity. This one probably hit me on a spiritual level, not because I relate to the person inside the episode, but because people that act like that actually exist in real life. While with not a lot of meaning, this ties directly into the main plot in a really nice way. Also, I've done a thing that's quite interesting, because during this episode you can sometimes hear some Morse code that goes like... Well, I've went through the whole process of translating it using the Wabun code, and it says voices that press the eyes. From what I could find, this isn't anything too special and doesn't mean anything, it's just something that adds to the creepiness factor of the show itself. Another good episode is episode 6, titled Mother's Day, which tackles themes of family grief and the consequences of actions taken in the past. Now, I wouldn't like to go too deeply into this one, since I think explaining one episode gives you a good idea of the show itself. I'll just say that my top 2 favorite episodes are episode 11, Under the Gravity's Rainbow, for providing a satisfying conclusion to the main plot and having amazing visuals, and episode 5, titled Interlude, for having one of the most shocking reveals in the entire show. Apart from that, the overall themes of the show and of Boogiepop itself in general are quite complex and pretty hard to grasp, requiring increased attention to details, as each episode follows a different protagonist around, some good, some bad, but each with their own psyche and approach to things. Existentialism and identity are often tackled in creative ways. If I were to compare Boogiepop's existentialism to an inspiration of sorts, I would name Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, which portrays a man unable to fit into society and unhappy with the identities he created for himself. Similarly, characters in Boogiepop Phantom often lie to one another, creating alternate personas for themselves, never being able to satisfy their existence. Some aspire towards absolution, even against all odds. While the narration by the Underground Man is filled with ideological allusions and complex conversations regarding the political climate of the period, using his fiction as a weapon of ideological discourse, Dostoevsky challenges the ideologies of his time, mainly nihilism and rational egoism, and while Boogiepop does fight the political climate of its time by being progressive and presenting the Towa organization as a metaphor for societal conformity and repression, representing the world of grown adults or proper members of society. As such, the series and even the show does indeed create an echo chamber of ideologies by presenting loathing and loneliness as powerful tools for storytelling and having a nihilist approach, all while introducing characters that defy the nihilist idea and bring a sort of counter-current to it. As such, most characters end up defying their condition by the end of each of their respective arcs, creating a sort of hopeful optimism for what is to come. Identity is another prominent theme of Boogiepop Phantom. The show explores how characters struggle with their own sense of self and how they fit into the world around them. For example, the character Nagi Kirima is shown grappling with her own identity as a monster hunter and wondering if she is doing the right thing, not only in most of the iterations of the shows, but even in the novels themselves. The idea of Boogiepop itself stems from a multiple personality ideology presented under the lens of Miyashita Toka's consciousness, and Manticore is shown as a manifestation of a teenage girl's dark desire and impulses. Existentialism is also exemplified through the character Echoes, who is a physical manifestation of the collective unconsciousness of the characters in the show. The symbolism coupled together with a pretty good art style and sound direction makes up for an amazing watch if you're into thrillers and psychological horrors. The art direction is also quite interesting, having a bunch of empty shots with foreboding, empty feelings bleeding into the environment, late night city landscapes, and moments of happiness caught at twilight or caught in tandem with blinding lights during the day, and an intentionally blurry animation style, and you've got yourself a quite unique looking show. As for the sound design, it's scratchy and quite hard on the ears, but creates an almost alienating feeling I haven't quite felt from any other show. And now that we're on the topic of sound design, we gotta talk about the show's original soundtrack. I will create a timestamp for this part because this is a huge section of the video which I do not want to remove because it signifies my love for the atmosphere and creative thinking of these artists, so without further ado, let's get into it. Apart from the intro and outro, which are absolute bangers, we have an amazingly stacked list of composers who've worked on this, so let's take these things in chronological order. The intro, Yudachi, is an incredible melancholic yet mesmerizing song written and composed by Shikao Suga, which not only features visuals which tell you exactly what the show is about, but also create a nostalgic atmosphere reminiscent of the early 2000s, the time the anime was made in. The song is a soft jazzy blend of acoustic and electronic instruments, including acoustic guitars, bass, drums, and keyboards. The song opens with a simple guitar riff and gradually builds in layers as additional instruments are introduced. The drums and bass create a driving rhythm while the keyboards add atmospheric textures to the mix. The use of different instrumentation throughout the song helps to create a dynamic and emotional sound that reflects the lyrics and mood of the song, all while the visuals blend a mix of live action, video, and animated elements. The lyrics invite you to remember and think about the fleeting moments you spent with your loved ones while acknowledging their passing, and as such, this intro has cemented itself as one of my favorite intros of all time, and it's genuinely a blast to listen to. That's about it in regarding to this intro. Now, if we are talking about the actual lineup inside the soundtrack for the show itself, I'll name only my favorite tracks or name if certain tracks have notable artists. With that out of the way, I bet this list will be longer than the previous one. Starting off with Happy End by Flare, which is one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack. You might not know the name Flare, and that is because this is the pseudonym of popular electronic artist and DJ Kenichi, who also won in 1997 the Best Dance Music Video of the Year for MTV Europe with his song Extra. He has released works under the name Flare, U2, Yoga, and Rising Sun. The track I'm currently talking about was also included in a promotional video titled Boogiepop Phantom Fruits Video, which was on the DVD of the show itself. I couldn't really find more information on this, but I wanted to give a short explanation for the video playing in the background. Kenichi's style is strongly influenced by Detroit techno and features productions that are heavy on pads and synthesizers. He composed the music for the opening ceremonies of the 1998 Winter Olympics in Nagano. Creation The State of Art was used in the third level of the 2001 video game Rez, and some tracks in the soundtrack released to the game LSD were produced by Ishii. His track Let It All Ride has also been used in the PlayStation Portable video game Lumines 2. I've mentioned all of this because I believe he is one of the most important composers to take part of the soundtrack, and he's not the only one. Another track I really like is Penalty Taker by Audioactive, and I unironically knew about Audioactive before hearing about this anime, so this came to me as a surprise. Audioactive were one of the best successful reggae fusion bands to come out of Japan and were formed in 1987. Originally being a solo project of singer Masa, it later stretched out to be a full band in 1991 when 2DD, Shigemoto Nanao and bassist Takeshi Akimoto all joined. Masa had listened to reggae since he was a teenager and had played with 2DD in the ska band Vital Connection before taking his love of roots, reggae and dub music and forming Audioactive, named after an album by Dennis Bovell. Interesting enough, the production for this track features more electronic instruments heading more towards the dub music than anything else. The song features a combination of electronic and acoustic instruments, including synths, drum and bass. Yet another important track is Getaway by Susumu Yokota. This track features heavy dance and house influences, being a mix of the styles in an experimental creation which plays nicely with your ears. Not only is he well known for his work as a DJ and producer, Yokota was well known in the English-speaking independent music scene for his albums of experimental ambient music, including albums like Acid Mount Fuji and Sakura. Sakura in the present currently sitting as his most listened album on Spotify. He also had a long career as a house music DJ and released several high-regarded albums of house. Unfortunately, Susumu Yokota died on March 27, 2015, age 54, after a long period of illness. Adding to the pile of important tracks is a Furrow Dub by Sugar Plant. Sugar Plant is a Japanese dream pop band. Unlike most rock music, their music is generally very slow, mellow and melodic, in the vein of similar American slowcore groups, such as Galaxy 500, Bedhead or Low. The band consists of vocalist Chinatsu Shoyama and guitarist Shinichi Ogawa. The band also usually includes a keyboardist and drummer, these roles being filled by changing roster of musicians. Chinatsu and Shinichi formed the band in 1993 while they were studying at university. The band name comes from a sugar factory in Kawasaki, Kanagawa. And the song they released for this album was my first exposure to the series itself, as it appeared on a Discover Weekly playlist on my Spotify. I was pleasantly surprised by it, being an amazing ambiental piece reminiscent of an abandoned mall. The song is an instrumental dub track with a relaxed and dreamy atmosphere. It features a slow and steady beat with reverb-drenched guitars and keyboard lines that create a hypnotic and meditative feeling. The use of delay and echo effects on the guitar and keyboard adds to the dreamlike feel of it, creating a unique blend of shoegaze, ambiental and dub music. And the last track I'm going to pick is going to be Pwn by Rei Harakami. Now, if you don't know who Rei Harakami is, he was one of the most beloved ambiental and electronic music creators from Japan. He was a record producer from Hiroshima who was based in Kyoto, and he was one half of the duo Yano Kami along with Akiko Yano. Rei Harakami released his debut EP titled Rei Harakami EP in 1997. Shortly after that, his first studio album Unrest was released in 1998, and it was followed by Opaque in 1999. And then in 2000, Rei Harakami did the track Pwn for Boogiepop. The song is an instrumental track that begins with a mellow and dreamy melody accompanied by a simple drum beat and various electronic effects. As the track progresses, additional layers of sounds are added, creating a complex and rhythmic mess of colors and sounds which fits perfectly into Rei's style. Unfortunately, Rei Harakami has passed away as of 27th of July 2011. Lastly, the outro is a rock piece called Mirai Seiki Maruhi Club by Kyoko, which I'm not even gonna describe. It just slaps so hard you have to hear it. Just go ahead. I've gone through all, if not every point I wanted to cover about the show itself, including highlight episodes, music, art direction, and themes of the show. So, as a closing remark, I'll just have to firstly talk a bit about the criticism the show received. The criticism the show got was mostly for its ambiguity and the fact people that are not familiar with the Boogiepop universe coming into this found the show quite hard to grasp. And I've come to this conclusion based on the fact multiple of my friends could not piece together what was going on during certain action scenes. And not only that, but honestly the fact I saw the show first and had to piece together a lot of my own theories really added to the experience in my opinion. Although I've seen it be compared to Neon Genesis Evangelion as opposed to Lain, which gives you all the pieces and you can create a picture of the whole story, like in Lain, Boogiepop leaves a lot of its main themes and characters, even important moments, up to interpretation of its viewer, and while most might find this as a cheap tactic of creating mystery, I think ambiguity fits the universe perfectly fine. And unlike Neon Genesis Evangelion, where even with all the pieces inside the show you couldn't quite figure everything out, you can figure on your own without much help like 90% of the plot relevant things mentioned in Boogiepop. You just have to take into consideration events don't occur in chronological order and you must maintain attention while watching. I've actually found this video from this guy called a simp from 10 years ago who like complains that he didn't understand the show and says everything was not laid out in front of you, and then proceeds to contradict himself by making a lot of really bad points that miss the whole idea of certain scenes.
It didn't go in chronological order like you would usually expect, and so everything was all over the place, you know. So you would watch one episode with this guy and then the next would be someone completely different, and you would probably never see them again. So obviously you have the big issue of character development, you know.
Also, he pronounces Evangelion as Evangelion, so minus 10 points in my book for that.
What this show suffers from is the fact that, like Evangelion, you know.
Now, splitting that apart, I'd still say that the 2000s Boogiepop is an unfaithful adaptation of the source material, but it's one that nails the aesthetic and feel of the series. If you did wish for an animated series that followed the actual books and looked and felt like Boogiepop does, the closest we've gotten to that is this light novel ad, which is just plain amazing, well animated, and also respecting the art style of the light novels themselves, and it's just how I imagine the universe of Boogiepop to feel and sound. That explosion and the way Saotome bends in the fluid animation is just the way I wish to see the series one day, even though I'm aware that will probably not happen. That's all I have to say about this iteration of the show. If you have the time and you like psychological horror, go watch it. I guarantee you will not regret it. Now to focus on the black sheep of the franchise. Before I do get into the 2019 anime, I'd like to say that this being one of the last things presented in the timeline, we've missed a significant portion of Boogiepop Historia, that being the novels themselves, which go from the first one called Boogiepop and Others, released on the 20th of February 1998, all the way to the last one called Boogiepop Almighty Dizzy Mrs. Lazy on the 10th of May 2019. Unfortunately, out of all 22 light novels that have been published in Japan, only 6 have been officially translated and released abroad. The actual 2019 anime only covers volumes 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6, sadly skipping 4, and also from what I've heard and watched, the anime ended up cutting significant portions of the light novel in order to fit everything within the 18 episodes they had to work with. It is clearly a misdirected mess of just wrong interpretations of the ideologies the books laid out foundation to, which the original 2000s anime understood on a deeper level than this one. The anime was produced by Studio Madhouse, which was also responsible for the other one, Boogiepop Phantom, but this series was directed by Shingo Natsume, known for One Punch Man, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and Space Dandy. He had his script written by Tomohiro Suzuki, known best for his work on One Punch Man, and even with people with such great works under the belt, it somehow all went to shit. Before addressing any point in particular, we must talk about the structure of the story itself, as it has suffered greatly from cuts and removed plot elements that take away a lot from the story. For example, one of the most important parts of it is the setup chapter the book starts with, which I believe to be one of the best parts that was included inside the Boogiepop movie, and by far the best adapted part of it, because not only did the movie understand that we need to hear Keiji's Takeda's thoughts, which not only do a lot of auto-characterization that help with the plot, but also help us single out and identify with him. We have got to understand that this book came from a time of intense social and economic crisis when the Japanese financial bubble burst and a lot of people ended up losing their jobs. A lot of the media created around that time frame has a nihilistic, almost self-destructive property to it, and features obvious signs of loneliness and isolation. Even a lot of the few places inside the novels that are described are decrepit, abandoned amusement parks and foreboding towering unfinished buildings from an era long lost to bad financial decisions, which are seen everywhere, even inside the first anime, while the 2019 anime disregards all of that and ends up lacking a lot of the darker tone and themes that made the novel series so impactful, even though the novels had brighter colors and were an overall hopeful, optimistic piece of media. The anime does not adapt that correctly. The fact they've moved the whole action to the present day removes an entire layer of social commentary from the work, and while I did compare the show and the entire idea of Boogiepop to Dostoevsky's Underground Man, I still do believe my affirmations stand firm in the face of the way Boogiepop handles subtle social commentary by showing people being miserable, the weather outside generally being awful, and the whole world being covered in a dark veil of mystery, lies, and social manipulation. But at the end of the day, they somehow manage to win, and it all feels right. It feels optimistic, positive towards the progress. Hell, even the Toa organization represents a regular company of the time the book was written in, doing what every company did back then to stay afloat, abuse shitty practices, which in this case is abusing an extraterrestrial being for personal gain. Removing the time period from the story is removing an essential part of storytelling, and not get me started on the way they handled chapters 2 to 4. They crammed them all into one single episode. No longer do we get the specific inner monologues and diverse views, since we don't get time to spend with these characters we've known from the books. Saotome is one of the characters that in my opinion has suffered the most, not only visually but like in the way he executes his crimes. He's supposed to be like this quiet and well taught man, like mastermind that has a cold air to him, and without spoiling it, I'm gonna say they make him appear like a wuss. His changed appearance doesn't really allow him to have the same feeling he did before, if you see what I mean. Either way, one of the plans he executes in the book is while two other people are in the room with him, he manages to slip a drug inside a girl's drink, somehow gets her drugged and makes the two leave and make them, honestly, he makes them like do something else, and he drags the girl's corpse to be eaten by the Thing type monster from another planet or universe, and that's just insanely well executed. And there is that being he slips a pill while it's just the two of them in the room. Wow. There are multiple pacing issues and cut dialogue that makes the experience overall let a bitter taste inside your mouth. One of the worst parts of all of this mess is the art style, which some found to be lacking in detail and fluidity compared to the original 2000s anime, which by the way wasn't even approved by the original artist. Like this art style, during the production of the show, Koji Ogata, who is the original artist for the novels, expressed his dissatisfaction with the character design for the new anime on Twitter. He claimed that he was never shown any visuals for it before the show's production was started and had no real involvement in the production. An apology was later issued by Kodokawa after an investigation into the situation. It was revealed that Koji Ogata's lack of involvement in the project was a result of an error in communication with Madhouse. The misunderstanding was resolved and Ogata gave consent to the production to progress. Although that did not stop the redesigns from being some of the worst I've ever seen. So I'm just gonna list a few of the worst offenders. Oh god.
Look how they massacred my boy.
When talking about the OST, all I can say is the soundtrack is made by Kensuke Ushio, who is also responsible for the soundtracks of Devilman Crybaby, a part of the Space Dandy soundtrack, and the Ping Pong the animation one. And overall it's good. I by no means believe it's on par with any of the other OSTs, but this isn't bad. Although it clearly isn't Kensuke Ushio's best work. It features some really cool songs I'm going to play in quick succession just to give you a general idea. I think a lot of the Boogiepop community is really split on the show, and while many see it flaws, there are a lot of people who also find it quite enjoyable. I personally believed it was okay. It isn't great, but it didn't even manage to grip me as well as the other versions of this beloved franchise, and even the novels. And it's a shame we might never get to see a new anime or even a proper translation of all the novels. But there are fan translations of a few of these books. I'm going to link a Discord link to the Boogiepop Discord where a few members of the community helped me rewrite certain parts of this video through discussions. And I wanna thank again my Animalist user Bitnik for writing his original review on Boogiepop Phantom. Without that review in particular, I would not be here writing and reading off this script. I'd highly recommend you to go read the novels absolutely, since they are a blast to read through and feature quite an interesting story. Also, before I end everything, I'd really like to go shortly over every musical reference made throughout the series, since this series does that thing that JoJo also does, where some of the abilities and characters are named after bands, not all of them. More exactly, right before the conclusion of this video, we will have a short list with each song playing for about 10 seconds. You'll see. I will mostly focus on the first book though. The name of the first chapter, Romantic Warrior, is a reference to the title song of the 6th studio album of the jazz fusion band Return to Forever, released in 1976. Naoko Kamishiro is described as often singing the gondola song, Gondolo no Uta, a song popular during the Taisho period of Japan, mostly featured as the theme song of the 1952 film Ikiru. The name of the Manticore is a reference to the song of the same name by the band Emerson, Lake and Palmer from their album Tarkus, released in 1971. The name of Echoes is a reference to the song of the same name by Pink Floyd featured in the album Metal, released in 1971. The name of the second chapter, The Return of the Fire Witch, is a reference to the title song of the album In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. The name of the third chapter, No One Lives Forever, is a reference to the song of the same name by the band Oingo Boingo, featured in their fifth album, Dead Man's Party, released in 1985. The name of the fourth chapter, I Wish You Heaven, is a reference to the song I Wish You Heaven by Prince, featured in his album Love Sexy, released in 1988. The name of the fifth and final chapter, Heartbreaker, is a reference to the song of the same name by Led Zeppelin, featured in their 1969 album Led Zeppelin 2. The background music for this book, as revealed in the afterword, is Heartbreaker live version by Grand Funk Railroad. I think these musical references really add to the overall experience, but I can't really say much about each one in particular. They are made by popular bands I'd love to dissect, but frankly, we are kinda running out of runtime on this video, so I hope you enjoyed your short or brief history of this series. Also, PS, someone from the official server told me the 7th book is the best one, so make sure to read that one. Anyways, if you've enjoyed the video and want to see more, please make sure to like and subscribe as always, and also check the video description for additional links and sources. Thanks for everything, I've been Luca, and I'll probably see you next time. Bye!